maintenance of plant, and then in his private life demonstrated that he has a very casual relationship with truth. And yet this is the guy at the heart of British government who is responsible for injecting business ethos. Well, we shouldn't be surprised, of course, at how things have unfolded over the last couple of years. After Quadrilla had drilled and fracked a couple of wells in Lancashire, and we had the two earthquakes, one of 1.5 and the second one of 2.3. Now, that area of the country isn't renowned for seismic activity, and the only thing that had gone on that was any different from previous was Quadrilla's activity. And so a moratorium was put on fracking. Once it became established that the seismic activity was most probably directly related to Quadrilla's activity, we had the moratorium. And I've got to tell you, at that time I thought, thank God for that. Thank God. Hopefully that's enough to shut this thing down and we're not going to hear any more about it. But of course I didn't bank on Lord John Brown and co and their determination. And it was in November of last year when Lord John Brown was trotted out to hold a press conference to announce that he was going to do whatever it takes to get Britain at the heart of the shale gas revolution. And when there was limited reaction from the media and from the general public, of course just a few days later David Cameron announces that he is going to lift the moratorium. Now fortunately, for some time there had been a number of people, including Vanessa and co, who had been watching what was going on here, and organisations like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth, they were having a watching brief on what was going on. So amongst the activist community there was a reasonable level of awareness. But the industry and government work on the basis that they can handle, if you like, the traditional activists. So at the end of 2012 I realised that we had a very narrow window of opportunity here. And what we had to try and do was get an awareness of the hydraulic fracturing agenda and the dangers associated with it out into the wider arena, into the general public. So I cancelled all the plans I had for 2013, and we put the tour together, and I deliberately targeted towns that were outside of the immediate area. So I didn't come into the heart of Sussex. I did a whole bunch of talks along the south coast, along the M4 corridor, and then literally up and down the country. Furthest north I got was Edinburgh and Glasgow. And it ranged, there was no pattern. Well, the only pattern was that England's asleep compared to Scotland, Wales and Ireland. The talk in Blackpool, we had 140 people there. But that shouldn't be really too surprising, because obviously they had had the direct experience of Quadrilla's presence. Elsewhere in the country, the largest audiences were Glasgow, Edinburgh, Swansea, Ebbw Vale, Belfast and Dublin. Notice anything common denominator? Not too many English towns or cities in there. The average in England was about 25 people per event. And with a few exceptions, there was no representative of any of the activist groups. It was just Middle England. But it was sowing the seeds. And I knew, because I told Quadrilla I was going to do the tour, and every probably second or third talk, I would see somebody come to the door at the back of the room or to a window at the side of the room, and they'd be going... Well, if they'd have done the tally up at the time... by the way, the word came back that after 140 people in Blackpool, Quadrilla considered that a success for them. Because they decided that if only 140 people could turn out to a meeting on this issue in Blackpool after what they'd experienced, then there obviously wasn't really too much opposition. But I'm pleased to say that Quadrilla, or whoever it was that they had counting the number of people coming to these events, was like counting seeds, or trying to count seeds for a prospective forest, and then trying to work out how many trees there are going to be. You can't do it. And what we're now seeing, and this is thanks to Balcombe. Balcombe has been the process of germination right across the country. All the seeds that had been laid, whether those seeds had been laid by the groups that have been set up, like Frack Free Sussex, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, Frack Off, from the tour, all of these seeds that were out there were just waiting for Balcombe. They didn't know it. Had Balcombe just literally been a one-day protest and then everybody gone home, then unfortunately we'd be in a very different situation. But fortunately, it hasn't been. It's been 6.5 weeks of continuous presence. You know, the people that have been at the camp from day one have done us all a tremendous service. And strategically, I'm not going to get into it, but you know, the most ridiculous strategy for any attempt at social change was that of the miners in 1984. Because there was a whole bunch of circumstances that worked against the miners. With this situation, everything has worked in our favour. You know, synchronistically, obviously the moratorium was in place, so the quadrilla couldn't do very much. When the moratorium was lifted, they then had to go through the process of consultation again, and get all the logistics in place. Meanwhile, they had a licence, or the planning permission, which was fast approaching its expiry date. And it just so happens that they could only get their act together to start operations here right in the middle of summer, right at the start of the school holidays. I mean, this is brilliant. Had it been February, we might have been in a very, very different situation. So it's absolutely worked in our favour there, because, you know, when I went back there on Friday, obviously the numbers are a lot less. And the first thing you notice is that there are no kids running around. Because some of the families that were there for the duration have obviously gone home because the kids have had to go back to school. But nonetheless, the fact that we've had that presence there, that permanent presence, bolstered by people coming in on day trips, and again at weekends, and with the weekend events that have been organised, and with supports from bands like Seize the Day, and who else came? A Kangaroo Moon. I mean, all of this has helped get the message across there. The other factor is that the protest, the protection camp, has been peaceful. And this was absolutely crucial in terms of the strategy. Because what is absolutely critical to the continuing success of this campaign is the buy-in of Middle England. And I think that there have been some attempts to try and up the ante at the camp, which fortunately have been resisted. So generally the demeanour of the camp has been one of peaceful protest. And this hasn't gone unnoticed around the country. So these seeds that were sown are now germinating. A number of groups have manifested. 6 weeks ago, there was an inaugural meeting of half a dozen local groups in Worthing. On Friday, they had the first formal meeting of Worthing against fracking, 120 people. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going up to Hull and to Whitby, and then up into Scotland. I can't remember the name of the town there, up north of Stirling. And these are all the groups that are now starting to manifest, because people are starting to take a look at how close it's coming to them. And of course they're realising that through doing their own research that this is not something that they want, not just on their doorstep, but any doorstep close by. Now, because of the nature of this country, because of the fact that 64% of England sits above shale gas or coal bed methane deposits, 64%, everything you see in green here is what the British Geological Society recognises as viable, or potentially viable, shale or coal bed methane. By the way, I have a very strong suspicion that the author of the British Geological Society report lives about here. Because there's no question that this area here, down here, should be green. Coming right down through from Norfolk here, down through western Suffolk, western Essex, and down into London. All of that should be green. But for whatever reason, under the British Geological Society report, they left that as plain. Everything you see in brown has already been licensed. The next round of licenses is coming up for tender in a few weeks. I think that round might be delayed because obviously the British government is going to try and maximise, like 3G phone licences, they want to maximise the amount of money they'll get from them. And at the moment, I don't think they're going to get very much because of what has been occurring over the last few weeks.